Hey, here we go, going live again. Pond Boss Magazine, right here. Bob Lusk, the Pond Boss, checking in. Wow, what a fast and furious few days we've had. Good gosh, the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology, we had a blast. The weather wasn't worth the hoot, but who knew the week before, and maybe next weekend would have been better, but I don't know that it would have been a better event because we had a really big time with everybody. Gosh, we had, I think, 9 or 10 folks that came, and a couple from Kansas, South Louisiana, all the way from Florida, some guys from Texas. We really had a big time. So there's Tim Stewart. He was here. He's checking in. Yeah, Jason, I am 1 minute late tonight. I had a little report I had to finish up for a customer today. You guys know the drill. Pond Boss Magazine, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like, share this to your timeline, and you will be eligible for a drawing for a hat. And I can hear Mark Primo saying it right now, one of these Pond Boss mugs that knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. We really did have a big time. By the way, we have a winner this week, Zach Cook from Lowell, Indiana. We need your address, Zach, so send an email to info@pondboss.com, and we will get you a hat and a mug out straight away. Anyway, gosh, dog, we had a great time last week with the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. You know, I knew there would be some really good information conveyed, and I really hoped that there would be some excellent idea exchange and people making friends, and that's exactly what happened. When everybody left, they wanted to exchange information, and for those of you that came that are watching, I haven't had a chance to do that yet, but I will. I'm going to go through. I've been trying to play a little bit of catch up here today, and once I get caught up, which will be tomorrow, I'll send out an email to everybody that came. And let's see here. I want to be sure I've got this going here. You guys know what I do. I'm sitting here looking at my laptop while we're broadcasting. I got the sound off. I want to be able to see. I can see some questions. Justin Shank, he was stoked. Oh, it already jumped down on me. Let's see here. Hold up. Golly, where'd it go? To get a top fan. Yeah, top fan badge. That's pretty cool. Yeah, that's great. Yep, and Jason, yep, I am 1 minute late. Tim Stewart says, howdy, Micah Trell. Chuck Brinkman checking in from Missouri. Jason, hashtag Pond Boss Magazine. Happy Halloween, says John Funk from a soon-to-be snowy mid-Michigan. 1 to 3 inches of snow Halloween evening and night. Well, your kids will be trudging around with rubber boots on trying to get that candy, won't they? Scott Hohensee from Purina Mills. We had a big time, Scott, at the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. Everybody got to see some fish eat, put together a feeder. Got to understand a little bit more about what it takes to feed fish, to make them grow. We had a really energetic curriculum, and people had a blast. We talked about water chemistry. We made water chemistry simple. You know, and for those of you watching this video, when it's time for you to be looking at your water chemistry, the main things that you're wanting to look at is pH, just as an indicator. But alkalinity is the big deal, and if alkalinity doesn't range somewhere between 40 and say 180 parts per million, we need to have a talk. You know, so we talked about water chemistry, then we had a pretty long discussion about habitat. Habitat's a big deal. If you guys haven't figured that out with me yet, that's behind happy water. Happy water. Where's Dave Weber? Behind happy, if you don't have a good, clean, healthy medium for the fish to live in, nothing else matters anyway. But the next thing that's most important is habitat. I evaluated a couple of lakes yesterday. We spent time, Monday, was in the electrofishing boat for a couple of lakes on Monday. One's about a 3-acre pond, the other one's about a 10-acre lake. And we were looking at the results of our management efforts this year. And boy, I tell you what, we had some really good results. But one thing that was puzzling to me, in the 10-acre lake, we'd stocked a bunch of bluegill, adult bluegills, and some bluegills small enough to be eaten to kind of reestablish the bluegill population in that lake. Well, the lake dropped about 3 feet over the course of the summer. This is out west of Dallas-Fort Worth. And one thing we saw was the majority of the bluegill habitat that was peripheral right along the edges, the perimeter, was some really nice patches of American pondweed. The lake evaporated down so quickly that it left those American pondweed batches high and dry and they couldn't regenerate themselves or grow further out in the lake fast enough to become substantial habitat. So the bass in that lake really chowed down on the young of the year bluegills. The bluegill numbers were down. But all summer long, that lake was fertile. The significance of that is that threadfin shad numbers skyrocketed, as did gizzard shad numbers. They didn't skyrocket as much as the threadfins did, but they grew moderately quickly. We saw a whole bunch of gizzard shad in that 7 to 9 inch size class, and this is a trophy bass lake. So what the bluegill were lacking, the shad made up because their habitat was perfect and that environment was exceptional. There's Bill Russell checking in from South Alabama. Pat Williamson from Oakwood. Michael Eric checking in from Iowa. Ed Brewer, South Carolina. James Sampson. Ethan Lovelace is checking in, I see. Holy cow. James Sampson says, I have a huge cattail problem. I'm sick of these things. There's Mark Dauber and BJ Cox. Hey guys, good to see you. Jeffrey Soto. John Wilson, not John. Lee Ann's checking in. Danny Mack raced home from the Fox. He'll have to go back to HEB later. He's a procrastinator. Got to meet Danny Mack face to face. We got to hang out together. I asked Danny, I want to be sure you get what it is you want from this Institute of Higher Pondology. And he looked me right in the eye and says, really, the main thing I want to do is hang out with you. Made me laugh. But he does have a very cool pond, even though it's not huge. I think when Danny left Sunday, he had a much, much better appreciation for the value of small waters and how easy it is to manage those compared to some of these bigger lakes. So that was a good thing. Let's see here. I want to go back to the cattails for James right quick. James, the cattails takes years and years and years for them to become a problem. So I don't think I'd be too enthralled trying to knock them out fast. Now, I don't remember where you are. What'd you tell me? You're in... Let's see, I saw it up here. Well, tell me where you are. But here's the bottom line. Here's what I'm going to tell you today. With cattails, right now is the wrong time to do anything with them because they've matured, they've hardened, they've stopped transferring energy to create sugar in the roots and the tubers. So you're not going to kill them right now anyway. They're going dormant. And after this weather that we're having, depending on where you are, cattails are going to disappear. So they're going to die back, but the best time to get them is in the summertime when they're at full growth, just as they're getting ready to put their heads on. That's a good time to treat those things. And you can spend a little time online. Go to Aquaplant, Aquaplant website at Texas A&M University's or University of Florida's aquatic plant site. And for your region, they'll give you some tips on what you can do to treat them and take them out. But you want to do that at the right time of the year. This is not the right time of the year unless you got a track on and you want to dig them up. Then it's a great time of year. Let's see here. Brad Rom's checking in. And good to see John Wilson, David Case. Hey, David, I was looking in the garage. I think I've got Mason's monk boots or his hunting boots in my garage. Need to get those back to you guys. Let's see. Jeffrey Soto, hi Bob, how you doing? Man, I'm doing great. I'm still leading a pretty cool life. We had a house full of fantastic people. One of them was talking to me. I was asking them toward the end of the Institute this last weekend on Saturday night, I was asking several of them, has this been worth it? Every single one of them said yes, it was. Not only for the value of the knowledge that they gained, but they got my cell phone number so we can talk, which... Okay, I can help. I know more than some of them about pond management and stuff. But what one guy said, Mark Primo from South Louisiana, and I enjoyed the heck out of him, enjoyed the heck out of everybody. But Mark said, Bob, I could go to any conference anywhere, and it might cost $300 to get in, but by the time I get through writing checks and charging food and buying what I need to get and all that, he says, I've spent $1,500. And when I got here, I have not spent $1 because we took care of everything. We took care of they got to stay with us, and our place is kind of like a resort. You know, we got some pretty cool stuff there, and it's a very nice place to stay. You know, they didn't have to buy any food. Their schedule was pretty succinct, but not tedious. You know, the information wasn't overwhelming, but it was enlightening. And the best part was around the fire pit, one-on-one time, getting to know each other, where they can, all these like minds in the same room at the same time. That was really, really, really fun. So let's see here. Danny Mac, more great friends. That's exactly right, because Danny Mac made friends with everybody. Looks like Fred Bingham is checking in on Connie's phone again. Let's see, Chrissy offered Chapel from Eclectic, Alabama. Good to see you. David Schneiderman, lots of bang for the buck. He was there. David was there. He brought one of the easy docks, one of the more simple ones, easy to install, excellent dock. David brought it out so everybody could take a look at it. Had it on a trailer so it was easy to look at, go around, touch, feel. Our weather wasn't very good, but you know, what are you going to do about that? Nothing. Kerry Martin's checking in. Mark Primo. Hey, Mark, I was just telling people some of the things that you said at the Institute of Higher Pondology. And, you know, the thing about Mark, you guys might be in a similar boat. Mark's got some land in South Louisiana. In his part of the country, it's pretty flat. That's where crawfish live. So there's enough clay in the soils that he can build a pond, but his obstacles are that he's going to have to excavate. So when you start excavating dirt, what do you do with it? So Mark really, really started wrapping his brain around it. It was really fun to be the speaker, looking out on everybody, looking at everybody's faces. And Mark was probably the most passionate, energetic guy in the room. Now, there were a lot of energetic folks, I'm telling you, but Mark was soaking it all in. There's so many things. You know, one of the things about coming to an event like that is you just don't know what you don't know. You know, and although I think folks came to get some answers, what's truly happening is they were getting answers for the first level of questions. What that does is sparks the next level of questions. So the more of those questions you get answered that generate the next level of questions, the more thorough you're going to be when you do your game plan. So I'm real confident that Mark walked away from this Institute of Higher Pondology when he left on Sunday with some knowledge he can truly go use and some concepts that he hadn't quite thought about yet because he just hadn't got there. So Mark, you can chime in if you want to and let people know what you got out of it. But we really, really, really had an outstanding group of thoughtful people. And by the end of the thing, everybody was pitching in, helping each other. I don't know that I did any dirty dishes. Of course, we don't paper plates. Some can't eat a steak on paper plates, though. So anyway, the fellowship was astonishing. It was great, great fun. And let's see, is there any questions coming up? Let me look here. I'm scrolling through here kind of fast. I'm going to scroll back and make sure I'm not missing anything here. $35 a year, folks. Pond Boss Magazine. If you haven't subscribed, now's a good time to do it. What are some of your resources? You can go to pondboss.com. You can subscribe off the website. You can call the office. We have an 800 number. If you have a landline, 800-687-6075, or you can call from your cell phone, 903-564-6144. And you can subscribe to the magazine that way, $35. And they were kind of teasing me a little bit over the weekend that I tell people, you know, $35 a year for the nuggets you get out of this, cheaper than a Friday night date. And it lasts a year. A Friday night date and dinner doesn't last that long. So, good nuggets here for you. Subscribe to Pond Boss Magazine, please. All right, let me scroll down here. I don't think I've missed any questions yet. We tackled the cattail question. Let's see here. I see some more stuff come up. Chrissy says, I have about a half-acre pond that we've been working on since August. What's a good strategy for fall? Small bass population less than 1 pound, and bluegills are our focus. If you're not feeding your bluegills, you need to go ahead and feed your bluegills. You know, in Eclectic, Alabama, you're going to be able to feed those bluegills well into December, maybe even throughout the course of the wintertime. I don't know exactly where Eclectic is, but you can feed those bluegills. They're going to grow and keep culling bass. So on a half-acre pond, if the bass have been overcrowded, you need to be culling some bass. Now, what I tell folks is weigh and measure those bass and compare them to standard. If you don't have a standard curve, look that up and see. So that's the two main things you can do is feed your bluegills and cull some bass. If you'll do those two things, you'll see that pond turn around, especially a half-acre pond. It can turn around pretty daggone fast. Troy Seal says, are shell crackers better to stock in a small pond versus bluegill, and do they eat pellet food? They do not eat pelleted food. They now there's a big difference between those two species of fish, although they look kind of alike. Bluegill is the backbone of the food chain for largemouth bass. They reproduce, and I'm not quite sure I don't remember where you are, Troy, but if you're south of a line going through, say, Dallas-Fort Worth to south of Little Rock, Arkansas, through the middle of Alabama, over through the middle part of Georgia and south, bluegill are going to spawn 4 to 5 times. So they are the backbone of the food chain for largemouth bass. They will eat fish food. Now, if your goals are to not have largemouth bass, shell crackers might be a better idea. But they're going to they eat snails and mussels and bugs and things like that. So you'll have to have some underwater aquatic plants that snails eat where they feed in order for shell crackers to really thrive. Leo, let's see what Leo's got here. I got to click on where it says see more. Pick your mind time. Water body 30 acres. Large bluegills, red ears, and crappie population stunted at 5 inches. Low population of bass, largest at 15 inches. Small population of sterile common carp. Wonder how you get sterile common carp. That's pretty interesting. And channel cats max out at 16 inches. Recommendation of predator species to control the stunted population while providing good harvesting for the general public. I would stock some hybrid striped bass. Those hybrid striped bass can grow quickly enough that they can begin to bear down on young of the year crappie, while the largemouth bass can do some pretty hard work on those existing crappie. The problem is, I think what I would do is I don't know if you can change the length limits, but I would release all bass. Let me see. Let me read this again. The low population, largest at 15 inches. That's probably if it can be done, is be culling some of those bass, which you know that. But if you want predator species to help control the stunted population, I'd be looking at some hybrid striped bass and see if you can find them 8 to 10 inches long. If you can do that, they'll change the dynamics and the behavior of the existing fishery. And when that happens, and you start culling some of those small bluegill, small crappie, you'll start seeing things change a little bit more. The large bluegills and the large red ears are a direct result of overcrowded bass. So the largemouth bass really need to, and I don't know if you can convince the powers that be, if you could have like 2 tournaments where you let the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whoever, this is California, so I need to, no, I'm not going to say that. If you'll have some tournaments where and make an exception for a couple of days where kids can come and cull some fish out of a 30-acre lake, if people could cull 600 to 750 of those stunted bass, that will also make a difference. And see if they would allow the fish to be fed. If the fish could be fed, you could feed those hybrid stripers, get them up quicker, which I don't know how that works out there. All right, so let's see. Bass are stunted. Yeah, Chrissy says bass are stunted. Cull your bass. Keep culling bass. Feed the bluegills. There's Chris Blood and Jacob West. Chris is with Texas Hunter Feeders, who helped sponsor this broadcast, and we appreciate that. We put together a Texas Hunter Feeder. Everybody got to feel it, touch it, see it, understand how it works. Dug into it, took the side panel off to show how it's built to be consumer friendly as well as fish food friendly. That was good. Jacob West was here for the event. He and his dad Bobby, we had a blast with those guys too. Troy Seals in Tennessee. Okay, Troy, let me go back to look at that. Let's see here. In Tennessee, bluegills are going to be better depending on what part of Tennessee. So I'd say yeah, I'd zero more in on bluegills if you're going to have largemouth bass with them. If you're not, the risk you take with shell crackers in Tennessee is you get 3 or 4 hard cold snaps, especially where you've had some cold weather, it warms up and the temperature plummets. That's what kills red ear. I've seen it happen in western Tennessee. I've seen it happen in central Tennessee. Let's see here. Chris, hey Bob, we love bluegill and so do bass. How much feed per day will a bluegill eat? How do you know you're feeding enough? That's good questions there, Chris, especially from Texas Hunter. Chris, how much feed per day? Those bluegill, depends on the population. I recommend one feeder for every 3 to 4 acres of water. And use MVP, Aquamax, Purina's Aquamax MVP to feed bluegills. Now, a 50-pound bag in a typical pond that's got 3 or 4 acres is going to last about a month. So something a little bit more than a pound of feed per day is enough to feed bluegills to really get them to grow. Now, you know, how much should you feed? Based on how much they eat. If they're eating it and they clear it out within about, 30 seconds, bump it up. Bump it up. Now, we're going into the winter, so feeding is going to slow down. Depending on where you are in the country, it may have already quit. But as long as the bluegill are eating, feed them. If they're cleaning it up in less than 30 seconds, bump up the timer and feed them a little bit more. You want them to clean up all the feed within about a minute and a half. I think the general rule of thumb is what they'll eat in 5 minutes. Well, with this Aquamax MVP, you've got feed pellets that are small and that slowly sink through the water column, so the less aggressive fish can actually eat. So it doesn't take quite as long to clean the fish food up as though all of it were floating. Because the most aggressive fish come and eat, they'll fill their bellies up and then they'll go away, and then the less aggressive fish will come up and feed. That's why we've told people in the past, whatever they'll clean up in 5 minutes. But if you're feeding MVP, they'll clean it up in a minute and a half. And if there's still fish food on top of the water after a minute and a half, you're feeding a little bit too much. There's Joe Reynolds checking in. Bruce Condello. Hey, Bruce, we missed you last weekend, but you had a pretty good gig going where you were. Mark Dyer, what is the best forage fish to stock for a smaller smallmouth bass pond? Let's see, wait a minute. I think I missed something up here. I'm going to back up. Dan Brogan said, what's the smallest pond in acres one can build for fishing? You know what? Danny Mack's got a 1/10 acre pond that he manages really intensively. I think that's probably the smallest pond you can build where you can have some pretty good fishing. Now, what you're not going to do is eat a lot of those fish unless you're raising catfish. You can raise a lot of catfish in 1/10 of an acre, enough that you can feed your family for a year. But I'd say 1/10 of an acre is probably the smallest. I would encourage you to have one 1/2 an acre, even a little bit bigger. It would be more fun. Let's see, Chrissy has 3 grass carp in a 1/2 acre pond. Is that too many? Probably not. That's probably enough to clean it out. Let's see here. Now we go to Mark Dyer. Let me go down here a little bit. Speaking of Mark Dyer, I saw Mark Dauber on here a while ago. Didn't get to say hello to Mark Dauber from over there at Montgomery, Alabama. What's the best forage fish to stock for a smaller smallmouth bass pond around 5 acres? Would bluegill get out of control for smallmouth? And if so, what should you stock along with? Yes, they will get out of control. Smallmouth bass can't control bluegill, sunfish, especially in the northern body of water. They just reproduce too much, grow too fast, outgrow the mouth size of smallmouth. Pumpkin seeds are a pretty good choice, and depending on the nature of your pond, nature meaning the kind of habitat that you've got, your water quality, yellow perch can also be a pretty good addition with smallmouths. The catch is, if the smallmouth bass don't have as good a habitat as the yellow perch do, then the yellow perch are going to probably do a little bit better, and you don't want them competing. So be sure you've got the best habitat for smallmouth and mediocre habitat for yellow perch. Yellow perch can make a pretty good bait fish and the game fish as well. But pumpkin seeds are your go-to, and in this case, a small pond, fathead minnows could be added in there. Now, never, ever, ever tell anybody to add fathead minnows to an existing bass lake. I would make an exception to that rule with a smallmouth bass pond, especially a small pond. 5 acres is pretty good size though. Bluegill, yes, bluegill will get out of control. I would be looking at pumpkin seeds. Jeffrey Soto, what can you tell us about lily pads? I'm thinking of tossing a few rhizomes into a nearby pond that has no water plants, and the water has low visibility of about 12 inches. I'd like to provide some shade and shelter for the bass and bluegill and aquatic insects. Will these plants help the water quality and clarity? Are these plants invasive? Well, I'm going to tell you this. They can be. They can be invasive. Depending on where you are. Fragrant white water lilies can be highly invasive. American lotus, totally invasive. So be picky about what it is that you plan to put in there. And just because visibility is only 12 inches doesn't mean a lily pad won't grow, because the way they grow is their tubers will grow in the mud and they'll grow laterally. And about every 12 to 18 inches, a lily pad will pop up. Now the good news is they're pretty easy to control, but I would avoid the fragrant white water lilies. Go shopping for some, buy some from reputable dealers, and get some that are colorful, because that way they'll grow up in mats and not go consume the whole pond. Danny Mac, where's Mark and Tim? I don't know. I don't know where they are. Let's see. Okay, Mark, there he is. There he is. It's storming, so my satellite internet is almost... So Mark Primo is there. He's in there. All right, let's see. What's kind of happening here? Bruce Candello, I recently fished a pond that was largemouth bass only. The fishing was surprisingly great with healthy fish of various sizes. Can you comment on this as a possible management option? When you have bass only, about the only thing they eat is bass. So as long as you start off a pond like that, or it can develop to where the size class ratios are compatible, then it can work, but not work well. You won't have more than about 30 to 40 pounds of bass per surface acre of water typically. And so if it's a small pond, that may be okay for some folks. But what happens where when you have largemouth bass only, keep in mind it takes 10 pounds of food for any class of organism to gain a pound. So those largemouth bass have got to be cranking out lots of babies in order to gain an adequate amount of weight. Where it gets out of kilter is when there's not enough larger bass to control numbers of small bass, and you end up with overpopulated bass. But in this case, if it's pretty good, that means that habitat is minimal, that their congregation points are easy to find, and that there's just enough competition in larger fish to control the numbers of small bass, and they're still hungry. So I don't ever recommend bass by themselves, because they're going to eat each other and insects, and that's going to be pretty much it. When you say the fishing was surprisingly great, what that suggests to me, Bruce, is that you found 4 or 5 places where those bass congregated and you were able to catch them where they were congregated. But I would bet you that that's something less than 10% of that pond. And in terms of a possible option, it's a possible option if most people really, really want overcrowded bass, because odds of having a balanced fishery with bass only are very, very slim. Because what happens in the ones that I've seen, which is a handful of them, the water levels would fluctuate dramatically through the course of a year. And when I say dramatically, a 3 or 4 acre pond, the water can drop down 6 feet and then fill back up with rain 6 feet. When that happens, it concentrates fish to where they can feed on them even more heavily and get a few fish big enough to consume the majority of the fish. So Tim Jackson, Purina Mills, checking in from the Carolinas. Brian Lawrence, good to see you guys. Chris Piper, let's see, Chris stocked 250 copper-nosed bluegill this past March, had an existing brim population. Looks to have plenty of adult bluegill in your half-acre pond. How do I know what I need to take out? Yep, Tim's there. Tim was there earlier, and I see Tim chiming in. He's here. So, Chris, here's the answer to your question. If you will catch a few and weigh them and measure them and look at their body condition. If they're fat, chunky, and growing, throw them back. If they're not, either bump up your feed or start taking out some. Now, here's the catch about bluegills. Don't take out the biggest bluegills you've got. The big bluegills are the ones that can defend the nest best, and they're the ones that are going to make the smaller bluegills get bigger. They can't. Once a bluegill starts to spend time reproducing, their growth rates plummet. It almost becomes non-existent. I've seen 4-inch long copper-nosed bluegill in a crowded bluegill pond reproducing and be the dominant size. You know, and there wasn't a lot of predator fish there. So here's your answer. The ones you need to take out are the ones that aren't growing very fast, that are smaller, the next size class smaller than your biggest bluegills. Mark Primo, Mark was here. We had a ball with him. Tim Stewart was too. Pondology class was over the top. Anybody considering the next class needs to message me. Nothing like a great testimony from somebody. Great information, great friends, and awesome hospitality. Thanks very much, Mark. Man, we enjoyed the heck out of you too, man. I can't wait for you guys to come back. I mean, I just want to hang out with you because we had so much fun. Nick Allen, tilapia. I'm in Morgantown, Indiana. Recently, tilapia were introduced to our pond. What kind of effect can this have on our prime bluegill and red ear, 10-inch average size? I was told that tilapia will actually die with cold water temperatures. Well, Nick, tilapia will die with cold water temperatures. And when they introduce to your pond, here's what's likely to happen. You're likely to see survival rates of bluegill go up. Tilapia don't necessarily compete with, and it depends on the species that you got. They don't necessarily compete with bluegills, but they forage on algae typically. Now, I don't know the species you got because I could tell you something a little different if I knew. There's Mike Chico Garcia checking in. Good to see you, Chico. But anyway, the tilapia, the worst thing they're going to do is improve your bluegill population. Because one thing I've seen is when these tilapia start to reproduce, they're mouth breeders. They'll have their eggs in their mouths, the babies will hatch, they'll spit them out, suck them in, spit them out, and once they absorb the yolk sac, they spit them out, and it's prime bluegill food. Little baby tilapia are outstanding bluegill food, so they take some pressure off the bluegills. And those tilapia that do survive long enough to reproduce themselves, they're going to add to the food chain, and they're not going to hurt your bluegills at all. They're going to help your bluegills. Chris Piper, thanks, Bob. You're welcome. Matt Hines, thanks for going live every Wednesday. Hey, it's really kind of fun because I love the fast pace. I love the questions. I love you guys coming in and asking this stuff because it's pretty fun. It kind of helps me keep my brain rolling good. You're welcome, Nick. Hey, guys, don't forget, hashtag Palm Boss Magazine in the comment section. Click like, share this on your timeline, and you're eligible for a Palm Boss hat and a Palm Boss mug. Mark was kind of teasing me a little bit because it's kind of funny because this mug knows how to keep hot things hot and cold things cold. Actually, I've tried that, and it works. I don't know how it knows, but it do. All right, Troy Seal, great show tonight. Good info, man. I try to give you information you can actually use. And going back to that drawing, if you're eligible for a drawing, Zach Cook is the winner. Hey, Zach, if you're looking on the show tonight, we need your address. Send it to info@pondboss.com so we can get a hat and a mug headed your way, buddy. So, other topics we talked about at the Institute, and I keep throwing questions at me because I'm happy to answer those the best I can. As we talked about happy water, Mark's laughing. I can see him. Yeah, there he is. Mark's over there in South Louisiana where it's storming like crazy. It's fixing to get cold over there, man. It got pretty cool here. We got our first freeze coming tonight. Good, strong wind out of the north. We've had a abundant rainfall. Good gosh, we've had over 6 inches of rain since last Thursday. And some of that, about 4 of those inches, came during the Institute of Higher Pondology. We kind of had to modify our curriculum and modify our outdoor plans, but I think it all worked out pretty good because everybody got to do some fun things. But the information, happy water, habitat, we talked about the food chain. You know, one of the things that you guys need to know is that the food chain is multidimensional. And every species of fish that you consider using plays a different role. Bluegill plays a different role than red ear. You know, red ear sunfish are kind of an insurance policy. They eat crustaceans. They're called shell crackers because they got these 2 bony pads out in the back of their throat that can crush snails and crush mussels. Bluegill are a little bit more opportunistic predators. They'd much rather eat insects and tiny fish and things like that if they can. Tim Stewart, Tim's in Florida. And he and I have been talking a lot in the last month or so, and he said, I had a tiny pond with warmouth only. None were a decent size. Well, what he's not telling you there is he pumped it dry, and he's going to start it over. You know, the word of caution I gave to Tim today, talking on the phone, or yesterday, was to be sure if you have any puddles left that you take the fish out. You don't want any fish left at all. If you're going to pump a pond dry, you don't want to leave any puddles behind that have any fish in them because you want those fish to go away so that they don't repopulate when the pond fills back up. You know, so one thing I was telling Tim is it's not enough to try to go get some rotenone. Even though rotenone would do the job, you can go get some chlorine bleach or some pool shock and you can take out a bunch of fish like that. So let's see here. I see Steve Lewis checking in. Jacob West, lots of strategies on culling bass at 11 to 14 inches, but what are the repercussions of overculling? That's a great question. Think about that in a minute. Think about that. If you have a pond that is generating lots and lots of young bass, and let's say it's been that way, it's been stunted or overcrowded for 3 years. So now you've got some 11 to 14 inch bass that are 3 years old. Their propensity to grow large has been ended by their age. So if you cull all of them, that's not a bad thing. Think about it. What will happen next? How'd they get there? They were spawned there. So what happens is people often think that culling comes to an end, but it really doesn't, because you got young fish coming up the chain. You know, you got the 5th graders, going to be 6th graders. Pretty soon they're wearing a helmet playing football. Now they're on the freshman team. Then the JV moving up to varsity. Some are going to make it that far, some aren't. So the culling doesn't necessarily end. And Jacob, when you guys finish your lake and we get it stocked and going, you're going to start culling about year 3. And you know, and even if you do cull enough, what you're going to see in response to appropriate culling is you're going to see fish that are in different size classes. You know, the big ones down to the smaller ones that are all chunky, they're fat, and they're gaining weight at an acceptable rate. But what you'll see is there'll be enough young of the year from year 4 and 5 and 6 to fill that missing slot. So that even if you do overcull, that slot won't be void for long. Nature's going to cause those fish to reproduce and fill it back up. Let's see here. Steve Lewis from Hot Springs, Arkansas. Hi, Steve. Micah Trail, Wednesday, National Pond Boss Day. Whoop, I'd go for that. You're a top fan. There we go. Danny Max checking in, having a conversation. Let's see. Sean Peters, when you said great yellow perch habitat, what would you do? Well, yellow perch habitat, first of all, they lay their eggs in ribbons, and they like to lay it on things like trees and thick brush and things like that. What yellow perch prefer is they like to be able to feed in vegetation, have some depth. They don't care if there's any rocks or not. Where smallmouth bass really need rock and larger wood, like tree trunks and big tree limbs, for some of their best habitat, with some shallow water that's gravelly and that has rock piles, cliffs, drop-offs, things like that. That's really good. Where the yellow perch, if you don't have prime habitat that the smallmouth bass can inhabit and thrive in, the yellow perch have a tendency to outcompete them. So, just envision a Christmas tree, or envision the small limbs on a hardwood tree. That's what yellow perch like to lay their eggs on. Now, yellow perch are predators, so they're going to be feeding in the food chain as well as smallmouth bass do. So I don't know if that's a clear enough answer, but that's what I'm going to go with for the moment. What would I do for yellow perch habitat? I would minimize their perfect habitat while I maximize smallmouth bass habitat. Matt Hines, let's see, Jason Ipstead, did you say hybrid stripers will help control crappie populations in a 100-acre lake? Yeah, I think they would. They sure would. Now, here's the problem in a 100-acre lake. That water's big enough to support crappie. You know, so what happens with crappie is they like to fill a certain niche. In the spring, they're going to come shallow and spawn, but all the rest of the year, they're going to go hover above the thermocline or in the deepest water in wintertime near the best structure they can find. Structure for crappie is like the top of a tree. If you have a top of a tree underwater and 40 feet deep, coming up to within 10 feet of the surface, crappie are going to flock to that. I mean, just flock to it. So, hybrid stripers, if the crappie have a tendency to overpopulate, especially in smaller waters, hybrid striped bass can help control their population. Now, hybrid stripers naturally feed on shad. That's their natural food source. So if there's abundant shad, they're going to be feeding on those as well. But they won't thumb their nose at a crappie. Matt Hines, when weighing and measuring bass, is there any concerns I need to worry about with their slime coat? No, just keep your measuring board wet. As long as your measuring board is wet, the slime coming off is going to be irrelevant. And if you're going to weigh and measure a bunch of them, I'd go ahead and buy a commercial fisheries biologist rated kind of a measuring board. Those are outstanding. They're plexiglass. They hold the moisture really well, and just keep the fish wet. Anytime you handle any fish, they're designed to be wet. Wet your hands, and you're going to be less likely to cause a problem with their slime coat. Let me talk about that. Here's something not many people know. This will be something you guys will like. The slime coat of a fish can be taken off with dry hands. I have actually seen a dead double-digit largemouth bass that had a handprint on it that was fungus. So as the temperature drops, the fish's ability to heal from an injury diminishes dramatically. Cold water, fish, bass, especially bass, cannot heal nearly as quickly as they can in warm water because their metabolism rate is so slow. So if you were to take the slime coat off of a fish, you've injured it. It can't regenerate that slime coat so quickly in cold weather. It'll bruise. And then the third thing that happens, first thing is injuring the fish, whether it's a bump or a bruise or slime coat coming off. The second thing is that it's bruised. The third thing is a fungus will grow on that, and that's what kills the fish. So keep handling to a minimum. Keep your hands wet. Don't keep the fish out of the water very long. Weigh it, measure it. Some of the scales we're using now have a clamp on it where you can hang them. You can see it, electronic scales, and then flip the clamp. You don't even need to touch the fish for very much at all except on its lip. Okay, Eric Avery checking in. Good to see you. Mike DeMint joined in. David Rikes. Hey, David, good to see you, man. Danny Mack, I'd have thrown any of those F1 culls into my pond. Yeah, shoot, yeah. Next time you come, you need to bring a fish transport container. Sean Peters, great advice. Thank you, Bruce. Says, if you wanted hybrid stripers to control stunning crappie, do you need to deprive the hybrid stripers of pellets? No, you don't. Actually, I would go ahead and feed the hybrid stripers because if you think about it, they're going to eat that fish food, and they're predators by nature. So when the feeder goes off, say twice a day for 10 seconds, that leaves 23 hours, 59 minutes, and 40 seconds that the feeder is not going off. So they're going to come in and eat. Then they're going to go back to where they want to be anyway. So they're going to keep being predators. Hybrid stripers typically are not satiated by fish food anyway. They still want to be predators. So they're going to do it. That's a good question. No, I don't think you need to deprive them of pellets. Those pellets really, really enhance their growth rates and makes them get bigger quicker. And the bigger they get, the better that they can help be predators to control those population of fish that you want them to control. Danny Mack, new knowledge, slime coat. Yeah, the slime coat of a fish is its first line of defense against parasites, bacteria, and injury. It's a protective coating on that fish. So if you don't handle fish with wet hands, that slime coat will come off on your hands and leave a void on the fish. Now in the spring and the summer, it's always a bad thing to handle fish with dry hands or even dry gloves. But if you do in the summertime, they're more likely to overcome that. If you want to learn more about how fungus attacks a fish, look up saprolegnia. Ooh, there's your big word of the day, saprolegnia. And then you'll be able to see a little bit more about what that's talking about. But the slime coat, and actually, there's a little known fact or something most people don't know. When fish farms gather up some fish and they're going to bring them in, say they're seining up a bunch of bass, or American Sport Fish Hatcheries doing what they do, and they're collecting a bunch of fish. One of the things they'll do is they'll add salt, just table salt, to the water. And what the salt does in the water is it causes that slime to slightly dehydrate, which makes it more sticky and a lot less likely to come off of the fish. And then they're real picky about the kinds of dip nets that they use. They use soft, pliable dip nets so as not to scrape the slime off the fish, and they handle them in the water. You don't ever see fish farmers keeping fish out of water very long because of the slime coat. Because the more they bang against each other, the more they rub against each other on an abrasive net or in a tank, the more likely they are to lose their slime. And when that happens, then that opens them up to having some issues. Let's see, Danny Mack says, I bought an oxygen cylinder, but the threads are opposite of propane. I thought I'd just shoot a little O2 through the torch head. That was Wednesday at 8 a.m. Dang it. Well, yep. So what you got to do with an oxygen cylinder, you got to buy a regulator that goes with it. And with that regulator, you can regulate the pressure coming into the line that you want to oxygenate your water with. Well, if you're gonna, we've never talked about this, so let me kind of take you through a little primer on oxygenating water. Let's do a little math, because I've learned this the hard way transporting fish for a long time. When you're transporting fish and using oxygen, you don't want to add too much, because then you'll supersaturate the water and you can cause a disease similar to the bends that a diver gets. You don't want to put too little, because then you distress the fish. So you want to put this the right amount. So the proper way to put oxygen into water for fish is to have a cylinder of oxygen. A 244 cubic foot cylinder of oxygen holds 6,900 liters of oxygen. And from that bottle, you put a regulator on it, and that allows you to adjust the pressure in the line coming from the regulator to what you want to put oxygen into. So when that line comes out, we hook it to a flow meter so we can regulate the liters per minute. So there's a line going to a flow meter, and from the flow meter, we take the next line to a diffuser. And there's some micro bubble diffusers, there's leaky pipe diffusers, there's a number of diffusers. I would look at some of those nano bubble type diffusers can really break up the oxygen, or micro pore. I can't think of the name of it right offhand, but if you look them up, you'll find them. Look at Boat Cycle. Look at Boat Cycle. They've got some of those things pretty interesting in their catalog. But anyway, then you can regulate your flow rate. Your regulator gives you the pressure. You don't need more than about 10 pounds of pressure. Open up your flow rate at 1 to 2 liters per minute based on how big an area you want to oxygenate. And then you can start adding oxygen if you need to. So anyway, that's a good way to put oxygen into water if you need to. The only time I really use that is when I'm transporting fish, because it's real important that they can breathe while they're in transit. If they can't breathe, they die. And I can tell you stories all night long about different ways I've killed fish. So going back to the Institute stuff that we talked about, I think one of the most interesting things that we did was we went through a curriculum in classroom. We had Mike Otto come, and he talked about planning to build upon, which you got a couple of folks that were there that were planning on doing that. And then Sean McNulty, Dr. McNulty, came over from Alabama from American Sport Fish Hatchery, who's the company that bought out my pond management company here in Texas as well. And he talked about farming fish and the processes they go through, and some of the obstacles and pitfalls and pratfalls that they have at the farm to raise the fish that we turn around and buy. So when I say we, I'm talking collectively, all of us. When we're getting ready to stock fish into a pond, where do they come from? They're going to come from a fish farm somewhere. And Sean spent some really valuable time teaching people about that process and how it works. And then we got to spend a little time in the field. Anybody that wanted to got to go seine a small hatchery pond and see how that works. Put together a Texas Hunter feeder. We fed some fish. We put together mossback fish habitat. I'll tell you something I didn't expect to happen, but it did. I asked Mossback if they'd like to contribute to this, and they sent everybody their own mossback tree, something you'd pay $150 for. Mossback contributed those to this event. So everybody went home with a mossback fish attractor tree, which was pretty dadgum cool. They got to set one of those up and see how it works underwater and such. Got to look at docks, got to see a Tommy dock. They got to see Easy Dock. David Schneiderman addressed the group for a few minutes to talk about dock systems. How do you choose a dock? We talked about amenities, zip lines, how to use the pond, Bojo fish light, the deep glow fish light. We've got one of those in the pond. And we talked about, we did some electrofishing. And at the very end, I tried to tie it all together. So we've got all these concepts out there. The concepts are really good water, good habitat, excellent food chain. We talked about genetics and a harvest plan. That's what Jacob West was asking a while ago, is what do you do if you over-harvest or over-cull your slot limit bass? What happens? So when we take those concepts, then we look at the reality of gathering some fish, collecting data, and looking at that data, then we can tie all these things together. For example, when we see a 5-pound bass that's got a crawfish sticking out of its gullet, and Jacob caught about 1.25 pound bass in one of my ponds that had a crawfish sticking out of it, that had just eaten a big crawfish that I didn't even know was there. You know, it's a good time of year for crawfish. Well, bad time of year for crawfish if you get eaten by a bass. And then they can start to see how the dynamics of these fish populations interact and how they can grow and just how dynamic those fish populations can be and how all that comes together so you can create your own management strategy and something that can really, really, really work well. So that's what we did there at the Bob Lusk Institute of Higher Pondology. You're going to have another one in April, guys. April 2, 3, 4. I think we've already got 8 people signed up. I think we could comfortably have up to 15 people. I think if we get more than 15, that's probably too many. So, because we want everybody to have plenty of one-on-one time. And like I said earlier in this broadcast, I loved how everybody came together. I saw guys going off talking to each other, sharing ideas back and forth, asking each other questions. That was, my word was stellar. I thought it was stellar. Daddy Mac, let's see here. Oh, we got some more questions. Let me look here and see what we got. James Sampson, are hybrid stripers a better choice over largemouth for a trophy bluegill pond? No, they're really not, because in order to have a trophy bluegill pond, the hybrid stripers can serve a role, but I don't know that they can control enough bluegill numbers to leave enough space and competition for your remaining bluegill to get bigger. So typically, if our mission is to grow trophy bluegill, I think it's pretty smart to have largemouth bass in there because they're about the only species that can keep up with the immense reproductive capabilities of bluegills. Hybrid stripers can be a piece of the puzzle, but not the piece of the puzzle. Danny Mac, kind of hard not to buy some more mossback attractors once you have a free one. That's probably what they were thinking. Jonathan Stoddard, any advice on homemade fish habitats like the mossback trees? Like the best materials or things to avoid: tires, pallets, PVC? You know, I think I would look at PVC. And if you could get some 1-inch PVC, drill a 1/2-inch hole through it, spin it a quarter turn, drop 6 inches, drill a 1/2-inch hole through it, and shove 6-foot pieces of PVC, 1/2-inch PVC through those holes, that's an outstanding habitat for do-it-yourselfers. Piles of concrete blocks are excellent. Make them shaped like a pyramid. You want them to be, say, 6 feet by 6 feet by 4 feet tall in water no deeper than 10 feet. You know, if you want to do some things like that. The things to avoid, don't ever use chain link fence or barbed wire, because if you try to fish it, you're going to break off every time. The reason I like PVC is you can fish it and not hang up on it. We use tires all the time. I mean, tires, you got to drill some holes in the tires to let the air out, believe it or not, even though there's no inner tube in it. When you put them in water, there's not easy to get the air out. So drilling holes in them and then binding the tires together, where you put, a tire here and then one over here, so kind of a triangle, and then bind those together using the great big zip ties. If you'll use great big zip ties, then you can create some really nice fish habitat for tires. Pallets, I wouldn't avoid pallets. Just understand the kind of habitat you're trying to build and the function for that habitat, and then choose your materials. The things I would avoid are anything that can leach into the water. If you're going to put an outboard motor in it, drain the gas out. If you're going to throw your golf clubs in there when you get frustrated, that's fine. Just be sure you kind of stack them up like a pyramid. Chris Blood says, Bob, can a lake owner hire you to come out and visit their lake, make recommendations based on limits? Yes, they can, Chris. Chris is one of the guys I love dearly, and he's always saying, you really do need to promote yourself a little better, and I'm not that good at it. So I appreciate the nudge. If you do need help with a lake, that's what I do for a living. I go out and help people as a lake consultant, lake management consultant, to create a fishing program with things you have not thought about. Not only can I help you design a new lake, I can help you take an existing lake and make it better. And I can also help you learn how to enjoy the lake. Even though you might have the best fishing lake, if you're not having fun with it, what's the point? So I can help you with that as well. So yes, I'd love to do that. You can email me. An email at info@pondboss.com works, and I'll get right back to you. Danny Mac says, kind of hard not to buy some more mossbacks once you have, yep, okay, that's right. Yep, Tim Stewart, let me see here. I'm going to run out of time here in a minute, boys. 7:26. Tim Stewart says it was great. Tim was great. One of the guys, Tim is 25 years old. He's in the beekeeping business. He leases bees to almond growers on the West Coast, and then he turns around after he leases them and he sells them. So he's a beekeeper, professional beekeeper. He's 25 years old, and one of the guys, I don't remember who it was, it might have been Mark, said, he's a 60-year-old guy in a 25-year-old body. I mean, his ability to absorb knowledge, his humility was astonishing. Tim, we loved having you, man. It was great, and he didn't even make up his mind he was coming until Wednesday, and he got there Thursday afternoon, and we had a blast. And so, let's see. Danny Mac says you got to drill the sidewalls of the tire will float. That's true. Got to drill holes in the tire to let the air out. Jason Nepstad, I'm going to use chain link fence as an underwater habitat around my feeders to keep people from fishing them. Well, that's okay with me, because if people want to fish around the feeders, you might as well get a few of their lures. All right, let me see. I want to go back through here and make sure I didn't miss any comments. Yep, Jacob West. See, there we go. Tim is wise beyond his years. He doesn't even know it now. Tim, we don't want to blow your head up, although somebody probably already has, and you're immune from that. But Tim's ability to absorb knowledge and then ask the next level of questions based on his comprehension was really impressive. And actually, everybody that was there was just soaking it in and asking great questions and then exchanging with each other. So I thought it was really, really, it was stellar. It was stellar. I thought we were all well organized. The group of people, everybody got along great. We had a blast. So let me make sure here. I want to go back and make sure I haven't missed anything here tonight, which I don't think I have. I'll scroll back through them here in a little bit before I cut out of here, and we'll see. But I want to kind of start wrapping it up. If you haven't subscribed to Pond Boss Magazine yet, please do that. $35 a year. And that's what fuels the economy of all this. With sponsorships from Purina Mills, Aquamax Fish Foods, Texas Hunter Products, David Schneiderman, guys like that, without their support, it would be hard to keep this going. But really the backbone of what makes Pond Boss succeed is you as a subscriber. So I want to respectfully ask you to subscribe to the magazine. If you haven't done it, you can do it online. And when you do that, you're part of the family. And I'm happy to jump in there and help answer some of your questions as time goes on. So to kind of wrap it up, if you guys have any topics that you'd like to have covered or discussed, send me an email, because I'm kind of now flying by the seat of my pants. We've already talked about most of the topics, but if there's something specifically that you want to know about, send me an email and I'll write it down and cover it on my Wednesday Night Live show. Victor Moberg says, great show, go Astros. Can you imagine? I don't think there's ever been a World Series where the visiting team has won every game. So tonight, going to culminate with the champion, and I hope it's the Astros as well. So, you guys have a great evening. Thanks for joining me. Same time next week, 6:30 to 7:30 Central Time. I'll be hanging out with you. Get ready to pitch a few questions at me. So until then, guys, adios.